How many bells do we have for him to quit? Two. What time is the quit time?
15 till.
15 till.
I think so. After the year, I'm finally getting to it, figuring it out. I thought we figured it out. You come here now. Yeah, I can't.
Good morning.
Morning.
I have to stop myself from suggesting we all move close to the front. It looks scattered out there this morning. Must be the weather. This morning I'm excited to hear Jerry Bates. Of course, I think everybody here knows him, but he's one of those folks that can go to 20 different countries and somehow manage to feel at home because of the gospel of Jesus. Now, I know the last couple of years he's been frustrated because he hasn't been able to go some places. But I'm excited. I always, from the time I was a child, to hear a missionary speak. And he might even have a picture or two to show us. But we'll learn something that'll help us, I believe. So, Jerry Bates, I'm glad to have you, brother.
Well, good morning. It is certainly good to be able to be here with you again, and you can see everyone. It is a little chilly this morning, but it's not too bad. Could be probably going to get a lot worse. So, as Lawrence mentioned, things have been a lot different the last couple of years. The world is beginning to open up. It's beginning to get a little more back to normal. We did make 3 trips this last year, which is more than what we thought we might be able to, but it worked out. We were able to do that, but it's all in Africa. For the last couple of years, that's about the only country that's been open in the world. Most of all of Asia is still closed. India is open right now. Wayne Barry has just went to India and got back. So we can go to India, but probably, of course, I can't go to India, so that don't help me out none. But most of the other countries are still closed. But hopefully sometime this next year, they'll be opening up where we can kind of get back to normal a little bit anyway. But in spite of that fact, not being able to travel as much as we normally would, the work is doing very well. Matter of fact, it's bigger now than probably has been a long time. We've been able to expand the work this last couple of years, not because of any great plans that we made. I guess just providence of God more than anything else. But God opened up some doors, and we had the funds available to go through some of those doors. And so for that fact, the work is doing very well. Right now we have 37 weekly TV programs. All of those are in India. We now have 2 radio programs. They began within the last year. They are both in the Philippines, and I'll mention more about that in just a moment. One of them is Larry Murdoch, you see right there. He actually lives in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, but he speaks on several shortwave radio stations around the world. So he does the speaking there. We at World Evangelism actually support the program. And then there's a Christian university in the north part of the Philippines that actually does the follow-up work. So it's kind of a cooperative deal, which is always good when you cooperate with other works. But it's been doing all right on that part. We've also then began a new TV program in India. This is in the state where Bombay is located. And it's had phenomenal results. As you can see, the last month, it had 856 requests. And that's about normal. Some months a little higher, some months a little less. But that's the normal, about the average, I guess, of the responses they've been getting every month. Baptisms will run 25 to 30 baptisms about every month. And so it's in a state where, like I said, where Bombay is, but it's not a statewide program. It's more of a local program. But of course, he doesn't do all the work himself. There's one of the preachers that helps him giving literature to one of the contacts there. But we recently received a story from him about the results of the TV program, which I think illustrates exactly what good these TV programs can do. One of the preachers there got a call not too long ago from one of the political leaders of his state. Now remember, in India, most all the politicians are Hindu, which means they have no interest at all in Christianity. If anything, they're going to be antagonistic to Christianity. So I'm sure he was wondering what in the world this fellow calling me. Anyway, he called him, wanted him to go see his mother. His mother was sick. He was in the hospital. And so he went to the hospital to see his mother. When he got there and started talking to her, found out that the mother wanted to be baptized. And he wondered, how did you come up to understand this? He said, well, I've been listening to your TV program for the last year. And it's been on for about a year, so she must have been listening to it for the whole time. And, of course, she was baptized. The family now is listening to the TV program, but he did say, don't tell anybody about this. And they didn't understand why. But that just illustrates the good that you never know what the TV program is doing. He would never have been able probably to approach that person or his family and talk to them, but through TV he was able to meet them, and there's at least one person that's been converted because of it. And so that just illustrates to who the TV program can reach, and it's a lot more than what you would ever do yourself. Like I said, it's not a statewide program. He calls it a local program. But even though it's a local program, it still covers several million people. Since India's has so many people there, even what we would call a local program covers several million people. So it's about like covering the whole states of Mississippi and Alabama and maybe Tennessee all put together. We wouldn't call that a very local program, but that's how many people you're looking at there. The other program is in the Philippines. This is June. He speaks at noon every Sunday for an hour. Now, he doesn't really preach as such. The two men you see there, they were kind of a dialogue type of thing. And it's working out very well. I've listened to at least part of the program on YouTube. So most of the time he posted on YouTube, and you can listen to it there. I've never listened to the whole program for a very simple reason. You can't understand what they're saying. And so when you can't understand what they're saying, it gets old pretty quick listening to it. But you get an idea anyway of what's going on there. But it's working out very well. He said his program becoming one of the more popular programs in that area. And he's in an area where the church is not very strong. You see, it's right over here, right in there where the church, where he's located at. And that is an area where, like I said, where church is not very strong. But like I said, he gave him several requests and responses from that. He's about to run out of Bible correspondence courses. But we sent him a couple of boxes of books and everything. And he just recently got them just a couple of weeks ago. I'll mention more about that here in just a moment as well. So he should be in good shape on that for right now at least. But he also loves to set up what he calls Bible study centers. And these are little centers like that where you have literature like The Voice of Truth and other books. People just come by and pick them up and read them, and he thinks that's a great way to evangelize. And as I've said before, I think he loves The Voice of Truth. He said that little book has opened up a lot of doors, and so he loves to receive that book there. We have been doing more teaching by video, especially the last couple of years. Since we can't go to India or hadn't been able to, I've done 2 seminars for preachers there in India the last couple of years. Normally this would what we would be doing if we went there. The picture you see there was actually in November of last year when they had the seminar. I did another one in March of this year. Shane Fisher, who worked with us, had just recently done another one for them. This was just a month or so ago when they held that. So we've been doing more teaching like that. We're still working with one of the schools there in India. And in the last year, of course, 2020, they were closed for part of the year, so they didn't have as good a results as they normally do, but they still baptized over 170 people. Baptized over 170 people, so they still had a pretty good year. But they did suffer a great loss back at the first of this year. This is Samuel Raju. I don't know whether you ever met him or not. John Dean, of course, that's his father. He died in January of this year. I think it's COVID, but he had other problems as well. So, but the work would continue, no doubt about that. Of course, there's John Dean in the dark blue shirt and some of the staff at the school. But Samuel was able to work pretty much right up to the end. This picture made just a couple of months before he passed away. And so the work will continue, but I know they'll miss him a great deal there. This is a picture of Philemon. Now, he'd been by here, I remember, a couple of years ago. This was made back in 2018. That's when he was healthy. Well, in January 2020 of this year, he had a stroke. Fairly severe stroke, but he's made good recovery. He's able to be traveling again and everything. Now, he has suffered a little bit of loss of movement. He doesn't walk like he did before. If you ever see a video of him walking, you kind of see a little different gait and everything like he normally would. But the best thing is it did not affect his brain or his speech any. For a preacher, that's pretty important. So he's still able to do his work anyway. He's speaking on the eldership back at his home congregation there in India. And this is one of the things that we've seen in the last couple of years. Now, not only in India, but also in Trinidad, Tanzania, and Ghana, you have churches either appointing elders or they're interested in appointing elders. And so that's a good thing to see. Not only churches growing numerically, but they're also growing spiritually, where they want to be organized like God wants them to be organized. And the blind work continues to go well in India, and especially in the last couple of years, the benevolent aspect of this has become very important. Because as you might imagine, the blind people generally are very poor anyway, but in the last pandemic, during the pandemic rather, they've lost whatever income they could have, and so many of them were just almost literally starving. And so that become very important. The woman and the boy you see there, they was actually converted by the blind people. And so that reminds me of John chapter 9, where you have Jesus healing a man who was born blind. And of course, after he healed him, you remember the religious leaders questioned the blind man, who healed you and why and who and how and so forth. And of course he told them, but of course they really didn't want to listen to the blind man, because in their opinion he was just a blind man. He didn't know anything, couldn't teach them anything. They were the so-called experts of the law, and so they weren't willing to listen to the blind man. Well, obviously the mother and her son didn't have that same attitude, because they listened to the blind people and learned the truth even from them. And so Philemon gets the blind people converted, but then gets them involved in evangelism. And here is a picture of them giving some literature to the blind people to give to other people. And he said that when people give something to you, then you can give them something in return. And so it's just another way of evangelizing. But he loves literature. He thinks that is something that anybody can do. Anybody can give a piece of literature to somebody, even the blind people. And so it's a great way to evangelize and get them involved in evangelism. But as I said, during the pandemic, the benevolent aspect has become very important. This is a meeting they had during the lockdowns even, and this is something that I admire Philemon and his family for doing, is that at a time when he could have very easily used the excuse, and so somewhat rightfully so, he could have used the excuse, well, I'm not supposed to be out, we're under lockdown, and I'm not safe, I got to stay home where it's safe, and so on and so forth. He could have used that excuse and not went anywhere, but he didn't do that. They continued to go out and do the work all they could, at least even during the pandemic. And so the work has continued in that respect. That's a meeting you see there that had, even during the lockdown, they had to get special permission from the government in order to hold this meeting. But of course, during the meeting, they give them little bags of rice and also then preach the gospel, as well as giving literature. They gave them the Seeker's Bible course and the Voice of Truth in Braille. And of course, at every meeting, that's always distributed there. They're still continuing the JC School of Evangelism. Now, this is not a preacher school, but it's a program designed to encourage individual Christians to become more evangelistic. The plan is to have one meeting every month at different places for about 18 months. And so just a few months ago, they had a graduation of the group there. And you see how many people, Bibles and Bible lessons and so forth that was passed out by the people, and how many baptisms took place. And remember, this was not preachers, and these were just ordinary people who were doing the evangelism work. And the good part is, once they start doing it, then of course they don't quit. They continue to do that and bring the results there. Of course, the Voice of Truth continue to be one of our main works. This is, right now we're translating that into 4 different Indian languages in addition to Braille. We also print it in a Nepali language. It's also printed in English in India, Nigeria, and in Ghana. And this slide just gives you the kind of an overview of the outreach of this. It's a lot bigger than what most people might think. Over every quarter or so, we send out about 60,000 copies, distributed something like 50 or 55 different countries around the world. So you see that most of the copies go into other countries. Over half of the copies, total copies, are going to other countries and not in the U.S. Now remember, this is English. This is not counting what we translate in other language. This is about English. So just gives you a good overview of how far outreaching it is here. As I mentioned earlier, we send some boxes to the Philippines. These are the boxes that we mentioned. You can send one of these boxes for $120. And they'll hold over 300 pounds of literature, so that's quite a bit of literature for that money. And the best part is they'll come by and pick it up. You know, most times you got to carry it somewhere to ship it, but this is one of the cases where they actually come by and pick it up, and so that's a great deal for us. You see pictures there of 5 boxes. Back a few months ago, we actually shipped 7. And so we kind of keep on finding other ways to send other people wanting the literature there in the Philippines. We'll do this about every 6 months. So sometime in January or February, we'll try to send out another several boxes there. We also ship literature to Guyana and Trinidad. This time we also sent it to Grenada. There's a company in Nashville, Tennessee that ships to all the Caribbean islands. And so at a good rate, and that's a good way to do it. Now, some people might think, well, if they ship to all the Caribbean islands, why don't you ship literature to all the islands then? Well, the problem is, of course, you got to have somebody there willing to get it and do something with it. So it's not like a matter, well, just ship it to the islands and, you know, do something. If you do that, most times it's going to be just wasted. And so you got to have somebody there that's willing to get the books and do something with it. We have found contacts in Bermuda and Jamaica. So we'll probably send some of those books to those countries the next time we ship out as well. But especially Guyana, they love the barrels you see here. A little hard to pack in these barrels, because they're round, of course, and the box is square. So you open the boxes up and you put them in all the individual spaces you can there. But what we ship, of course, would be books like The Voice of Truth. It might be Bibles. It might be books that we pick up from congregation, Bible class literature, maybe preachers' books they pick up from libraries and that sort of thing. So a number of things that we pick up and collect, and besides our books that we've sent to their various places, which is always good too, because no matter where you go to, they need literature, all types of literature. So exactly what we're going to be going to in the future, we do not really know. We normally would go to Nepal, to Myanmar, the Philippines, and Vietnam every year. Of course, hadn't been to any of those countries the last 2 years. And I think as of right now, they're still closed to foreign visitors. But hopefully sometime this next year, as I said, they will open it. We'll be able to go there, but we don't know when. Our immediate plans is to go to Tanzania. That would be, and also then Kenya. That would be the last week in February and the first couple of weeks in March. That's the immediate plans anyway, and that looks like to be the next trip there. But most of the places we go to, of course, we're working with the Bear Valley Extension schools. They've added a few schools. Right now they have 44 schools in 28 different countries. But you see all those schools together baptized over 2,400 people. Now that's less than usual. Most all the schools were closed for at least part of last year. And so normally they probably would have baptized twice that many. But hopefully this next year, at least 2021, will be better, because most all the schools have been open for most all of the year, I think. So it's kind of getting back to a more normal year. But in Africa and in other countries, motorcycles is a common way of getting around, and you see anything on motorcycles. I mean, literally, you're liable to see anything on motorcycles. You may see many people, as you can see here. You also may see anything. There's a bunch of bananas that somebody's hauling on the motorcycles. One time in India, we saw 2 men and a live goat traveling on a motorcycle. We've even seen a couple of times people carrying ladders, like 10 or 12-foot ladders. You'd put the rails of the ladders on their shoulders, and their head would be sticking up through the center of it there. And I've always thought, what would happen if you have a wreck there? But don't want to think about that. But anyway, like I said, you never know what you're going to see on motorcycles. But my first trip this last year was in Ghana. I try to go to Ghana about every year. Probably this next year we'll be going there too. Not sure exact dates yet right now. Maybe May or so, but that's still open up in the air. But when we got there this time, I met Seth Larby, you see there. He runs the Guide-like Literature Center. At the first of this year, we sent some money over there to him to help buy the van to be used in his campaign work. He also ships literature all around the country. I mean, not the country, but all around his country. It'd be books like our books. It might be World Bible School literature. It might be literature for mission printing. But anyway, when I got there, we traveled all across the country, almost to the Ivory Coast border. And had a meeting over there with a group of people. Of course, carried a lot of literature with us as well. The whole back seat of the van was filled up with literature. When we got to where we were going, it was actually the women who unloaded the van and the books. And notice they carried everything on top of their heads. I'm sure Lawrence seen that many, many times in his travels over there. But in Africa, only the women do this. I've never seen a man carrying anything on their head. Have you seen a man carrying anything on their head? Okay. Maybe once or twice. Very seldom you'll do it. I guess they're not coordinated enough to do it. I can see that. I sure couldn't do it anyway. But at any rate, the ladies make it look so easy. I mean, they carry everything there, and they make it look so easy there. I've heard that occasionally they drop something, but I've never seen it. I've never seen them drop anything. But it seems like the women do all the hard work there in Africa, and that's an example of it there. But there's the crowd we had there on Saturday. It was a leadership seminar. And when I go back to Ghana this next year, I'll be doing something similar to this again at this place and maybe a nearby place. But about 17 congregations were represented out of this crowd here. And then the next day after preaching here, then we traveled about 45 minutes through to this congregation. And there's a brand new building you see here. Now, obviously, it's not completely finished, but they're able to use it. But you see how they're doing here. This is the old building, so you can see a big difference between the old and the new buildings. And as far as I know, there's no American money involved in this, so they're doing it all on their own. And that's always good to see congregations that's able to take care of their own needs there. And so that congregation certainly is doing very well. And if I go back there again, this is the plans to have another meeting at this congregation as part of the leadership meeting we were talking about here. Then the next Saturday, we had the same meeting at Ghana, back in Accra, which is the capital city, near to where the school is located. About the same number of people, but about 50 congregations represented here. But you see, there are practicing some form of social distancing, and some people wearing a mask. So they have some COVID over in Africa, but not nearly like we have here in other places. And so that's one reason why, for the biggest part, Africa has remained open to visitors. But most all the Africa countries are very poor. The roads are not very good. The main road may be good, but you get off the main road and you pretty much got dirt. And that's what you see there in Ghana. This is the road that I walked on from the hotel to where the classes were being held, which is about a half a mile or so. And it rained 3 or 4 times while I was there, because you know what happened to the rainwater. And so there's a big mud hole there in the road. You come over here to the left-hand side, just barely missing the water. You go a little bit further, the mud hole gets bigger, and you got to walk a little bit further around. Then you go a little bit further along, and you got to walk on the rocks like you see that man there is doing, not to wade through the water. So sometimes it might be a challenge to avoid the water. I was able to do it this time at least, and but I've always enjoyed going to Ghana nevertheless. Then back in the May and June of this last year, we both went to Uganda and Zimbabwe. Of course, I've never been to either one of those countries before. Went to Uganda because Terry wanted me to go. He'd been wanting me to go for several years, but just seemed to never have a chance to go. But with our limited travel schedule now, of course, we was able to do some other things. And so we did go there, and worked out very well that we were able to do that. We traveled across the country to the extreme western side, up in the mountainous area, very beautiful area as far as that is concerned, some of the highest mountains in the world. And when we first got there that Sunday, of course, we stayed in the base of the mountains and had to drive up into the mountains, and the taxi driver said, you're going to have to take a detour because the day before part of the bridge collapsed, but he didn't tell us that the detour involved literally crossing a river. So now this was not a four-wheel drive or a high clearance car or anything, just a regular old car. So we were kind of a little apprehensive about crossing the river. As you can see, it was more than just a little stream there, but we had no problems, fortunately, and fortunately a couple of days later the bridge was fixed and was able to use it the rest of the time there. But this is the church building. You've probably seen this picture before. I guess Terry's probably shown them before. But a nice church building there, probably 80 or so people gathering there on Sunday, but a very poor area. They just literally live from day to day. Most everybody walks wherever they go. This is after church there on Sunday. Of course, you see no cars, no motorcycles or anything. I think there was one car, and that was the car we drove in on. There might have been one motorcycle or two. I can't remember now. But, of course, this is the school. Just up the road a quarter of a mile is the school that Terry works with. And, of course, Paula also taught Bible classes there at the school every day. But the school had about 400 students enrolled in it. Just to show how blessed we are, these are some new facilities the church just built. And they're kind of proud of those, but it's been a long time since we had to use things like that at church. This is the classes that I taught there. And this is the School of Preaching, and we're now restarting the school, and we're finishing the money to fund the School of Preaching. But it's not a full-time school, but the plans have three-week sessions every year for the people there in that area. And both of us noticed that, generally speaking, there was a lack of biblical knowledge among the people, even among the preachers, especially of the Old Testament. They just seemed they did not know what you would think they would know and should know anyway. And so you had a good class there, as you can see, but the classes were literally being held in what we would call a cowshed, but they worked out very well. Back in September, I think it was, they had another session, and this time they were able to use the school building, which is a lot better facilities. And I think they're having another session in January. That's the plans at least. And so, like I said, have three-week session there. In between then, they have a lot of evangelism, where the preachers that are there travel around to congregations that don't have preachers. There's many congregations in that area. Many of them don't have preachers. Most all the preachers have not had any special training. And so, like I said, there's a great need for this school in that particular area. And so hopefully it'll help solve some of those problems in the coming years. Paula taught a ladies class every day for the first week at least. And some of her ladies walked an hour and a half in order to attend the classes there. They were there by 9 o'clock in the morning. But like I said, everybody walks wherever they go. Even the preacher's wife teaches school, and she walks an hour and a half to get to her school. So, you know, we think here that if you have to commute for an hour in an air-conditioned car, that's a long way, and that's terrible to have to do that. Well, how would you like to walk an hour and a half in the morning, teach school all day, walk an hour and a half back home? And then when you get home, she had 5 kids at home, so she's a very busy individual there. From there, then, we went to Zimbabwe. Like I said, we've never been to Zimbabwe again either. But this time we were going to meet Philemon there. The plans was to have a JC School of Evangelism there. Same thing he'd been doing in India. This came about as a result of a recommendation from somebody in India that went through the program. Somehow he knew this guy in Zimbabwe, said, you need to get him over there. So he invited him to come, and Philemon went there for the first time in December 19. You remember he had a stroke in January 20, and of course, about the time he's getting where he might be able to think about traveling again, that's when the COVID lockdown hit, and so he hadn't been able to get back. He was going to meet us there this time, but shortly before the trip, had a big surge there in India, so his flights were canceled, and so he wasn't able to make it. But he did go in September. I think he's planning on going again in January, so things beginning to get back to normal on that part as well. But this is the family and preacher that we met, and we're very impressed with him and his zeal for evangelism. This is his congregation, about 200 people gathered there on Sunday, but this is the classes that we have there every day. And of course, this illustrates again just how blessed we really are here. Now, this is not in a rural village. This is in what we would call a subdivision of the capital city. So a very urban area, and you see the roads there just plain dirt. All the women you see there, and they're mainly women, they're carrying their buckets where they're gathering there to get water. Healing Hands dug a well with the water filtration system on church property, and so most all the homes there do not have fresh running water in the homes, and so the women's going there in the 5-gallon buckets to get the fresh drinking water. And I don't know, I have no idea how far they're carrying it, but it doesn't matter. You know, 5 gallons of water gets pretty heavy pretty quick when you start carrying it. But so you never know what they're going to have to be doing. But, you know, we think here that running water is one of the absolute necessities of life. Well, it's not either. You can get by without it. It's certainly one of the great luxuries of life, but it's not a necessity as such, as we see here. But again, that just illustrates how blessed we are. But there's people lining up all the time for water there. But the preacher there said that literally that well has resulted in thousands of contacts and baptisms over the years. So it's been a great good for the church there. These are the women that did cook lunch for us every day. Now what you see on that red plate might look like mashed potatoes, but it's not. It's what they call sadza, which is something like our grits with absolutely nothing on it and had no flavor to it whatsoever. So we did not care much for it, but they loved it. But that's one of their staples there. Of course, it's fairly cool there. It's getting into their winter time, and so they moved the benches out in the sun because it's a lot warmer in the sun. But Paula had a ladies class every day, and at the end of the week we had 6 people that were baptized. And Philemon, when he went there in September, I think he had another 6 or 7 baptized there as well. But this is a children's class that Paula had. No classrooms or anything like that, just out in the open away from the building. And of course, this is on Sunday morning. Nice sized church, like I said, about 200 people or so gathered there. But then on Sunday afternoon, we went to this congregation. This is a brand new congregation. They're in the process of starting. It's in another subdivision of the capital city there. And this was, when the picture was made, I think they said the 7th week that they'd been meeting. And so they're continuing to meet, but we're sending $150 to them every month to pay for 3 preachers to travel to 3 different areas to start 3 brand new congregations. And so this is one of them. So that just, again, illustrates how evangelistic the people are there. That we're helping them to do that. But I've heard that right now there's about 35 or 40 people meeting at this particular place where this church is meeting here. We've also started doing a lot of printing of literature there in Zimbabwe. And this is what we're really excited about. You see the thousands of tracts, or literally tens of thousands of tracts have been printed there, and thousands of books. The man there not only wants to get literature for his area, but he wants to get literature to every congregation all across the country. There's about 400 congregations in Zimbabwe, and he's getting literature to every single one of them. We've also started printing the Voice of Truth there now, which is a great benefit. We have been sending about 17 boxes to Zimbabwe, but that's very expensive. And so, counting the money we were paying on shipping, we put just a little bit more there with it, and now we're putting about 3 times as many books into the country as we were before. So it's a much better deal for doing that. And so there's some of the books you see stacked up ready to be distributed there. He's also working with a school not far from his church building. And this is a great open door. Now, this is not a religious school. It's a private school owned by one man, not a religious school at all, like I said. But for some reason or other, he sees the value of a religious education. And so every student in this school, which is about 1,100 students, is required to take the World Bible School literature. And so, you know, that's who knows what good that's going to do in the coming years. But he has a good relationship with that school. I went there twice, talked to half the student body each time. But they refer to the preacher there as their pastor. And so you see the relationship there. Then from there, I went to Tanzania back in September of last year. Like I said, this is where I'm planning on going back the first time this coming year. I went to teach in a school of preaching there. There's my class there, brand new classrooms. But these three individuals now working with us on a more closely basis. The two men on each end of the three, they are the ones that for the last year have been translating literature into Swahili language. And of course, not only are they distributing in Tanzania, but other places as well. The man in the middle is actually from Kenya. He's from the kind of eastern side of it, or close to Uganda, where he's from. I don't remember exact town, but he graduated. He was a student there at the school. He graduated now. I'm sure he's back home now. And so we're going to be shipping literature to him. He's going to be distributing literature in his area as well as some over in Uganda. But this just shows where the books are being distributed. You see a list of the countries there. And so we're very excited about our literature being in this particular part of Africa. And it just shows the relationship between schools and literature. You know, as we go to a place to teach, you're always talking about literature. And we feel like if you're going to work with somebody, then you really need to know them. You know, get an idea of who they are and what they're doing and so forth. But it's very difficult to justify traveling halfway around the world just to meet with somebody for a day or so and then come back home. So we like to put it this way, at least I like to put it this way. It's kind of like killing two birds with one stone, you know. It's a much better use of time and resource to do that. And so, but it just shows how it all works together. And every country needs literature. They're all pretty much the same in that regard. They don't have it, and they want it, and they really need it. And so we're glad to be able to do what we can to supply. But this slide here just kind of summarizes what our work really is all about. Of course, we got massive amounts of literature, both in English and foreign language books as well. The books you see at the top there are actually in the Vietnamese language. And then, of course, we got the TV programs. We've also doing more teaching by video and YouTube. I'm actually preaching on TV in India every week. Last year, we also started an English program in India, which covers most of the nation. And so I tape a lesson here, send it to those in India. They put the introduction and conclusion on it to make it suitable for broadcasting in India. And so I'm preaching in India, even though I hadn't been in there in a long time. So that's kind of the beauty of technology. So we have several different aspects of work going on, and right now things are doing very well. And we certainly appreciate your help and working with you and being our sponsor in church and everything. We might have, I heard the bell, first bell, so I guess we got, 5 minutes or so. So does anyone have any questions before we quit? Okay.
Do you know the name of the man from Kenya that you had in that picture of three guys?
His name is Peter Wafula, I think it is. Yeah. Have you ever heard of him?
No.
Okay.
I heard Myanmar was having problems right now. Do you know what they are?
Well, back in February of last year, or this year rather, they had a military coup. And so that's for a long time after that, it was a very violent area. People were revolting, rebelling, and rioting and so forth. I think that's pretty much calmed down, but they're still closed to visitors for COVID and that. And so it's a lot of things going on in that country right now. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay, well, we'll be around, of course, so if you think of anything, feel free to ask us. Thank you.